Kevin Cork. Question, thank you, Mr. President. You have been a strong supporter of the idea of a peaceful transfer of power. Demonstrated not terribly far from the Rose Garden. And yet, even as you and I speak, there are more than 5 dozen Democrats that are going. To boycott the inauguration of the incoming president. Do you support that? And what message would you send to Democrats to better demonstrate the peaceful transfer of power? And if I could follow, I wanted to ask you about your conversations with the president-elect previously. And without getting into too much of the personal side of it, I'm just curious. Were you able to use that opportunity to convince him to take a fresh look at some of the important ideas that you will leave this office with, maintaining some semblance of the Affordable Care Act? Some idea of keeping dreamers here in the country without fear of deportation. Were you able to use personal stories to try to convince him? And how successful were you? President Obama, well, I won't go into details of my conversations with President-elect Trump. As I've said before, they are cordial. At times they've been fairly lengthy and they've been substantive. I can't tell you how convincing I've been. I think you'd had to ask him whether I've been convincing or not. I have offered my best advice, counsel about certain issues, both foreign and domestic. And my working assumption is that having won an election opposed to a number of my initiatives and certain aspects of my vision for where the country needs to go. It is appropriate for him to go forward with his vision and his values. And I don't expect that there's going to be enormous overlap. It may be that on certain issues, once he comes into office and he looks at the complexities of how to in fact, provide health care for everybody, something he says he wants to do. Or wants to make sure that he is encouraging job creation and wage growth in this country. That may lead him to some of the same conclusions that I arrived at once I got here. But I don't think we'll know until he has an actual chance to get sworn in and sit behind that desk. And I think a lot of his views are going to be shaped by his advisors. The people around him, which is why it's important to pay attention to these confirmation hearings. I can tell you that, and this is something I have told him, that this is a job of such magnitude that you can't do it by yourself. You are enormously reliant on a team. Your cabinet, your senior White House staff, all the way to fairly junior folks in their 20s and 30s. But who are executing on significant responsibilities. And so how you put a team together to make sure that they're getting you the best information. And they are teeing up the options from which you will ultimately make decisions. That's probably the most useful advice, the most constructive advice that I've been able to give him. That if you find yourself isolated because the process breaks down, or if you're only hearing from people who agree with you on everything, or if you haven't created a process that is fact-checking and probing and Asking hard questions about policies or promises that you've made, that's when you start making mistakes. And as I indicated in some of my previous remarks, reality has a way of biting back if you're not paying attention to it. With respect to the inauguration, I'm not going to comment on those issues. All I know is I'm going to be there. So is Michelle. And I have been checking the weather. And I'm heartened by the fact that it won't be as cold as my first inauguration, because that was cold. Jen Rodriguez. Question, right here, Mr. President. Thank you very much. You have said that you would come back to fight for the dreamers. You said that a couple of weeks ago. Are you fearful for the status of those dreamers? The future of the young immigrants and all immigrants in this country with the new administration? And what did you mean when you said you would come back? Would. You lobby Congress? Maybe explore the political arena again? And if I may ask you a second question, why did you take action on dry foot, wet foot a week ago? President Obama, well, let me be absolutely clear. I did not mean that I was going to be running for anything anytime soon. What I meant is that it's important for me to take some time to process this amazing experience that we've gone through. To make sure that my wife, with whom I will be celebrating a 25th anniversary this year, is willing to re-up and put up with me for a little bit longer. I want to do some writing. I want to be quiet a little bit and not hear myself talk so darn much. I want to spend precious time with my girls. So those are my priorities this year. But as I said before, I'm still a citizen. And I think it is important for Democrats or progressives who feel that they came out on the wrong. Side of this election to be able to distinguish between the normal back and forth. Ebb and flow of policy. Are we going to raise taxes or are we going to lower taxes? Are we going to expand this program or eliminate this program? How concerned are we about air pollution or climate change? Those are all normal parts of the debate. And as I've said before, in a democracy, sometimes you're going to win on those issues and sometimes you're going to lose. I'm confident about the rightness of my positions on a lot of these points. But we got a new president and a Congress that are going to make their same determinations. And there will be a back and forth in Congress around those issues, and you guys will report on all that. But there's difference between that normal functioning of politics and certain issues or certain moments where I think our core values may be at stake. I put in that category, if I saw systematic discrimination being ratified in some fashion. I'd put in that category, explicit or functional obstacles to people being able to vote. To exercise their franchise. I'd put in that category, institutional efforts to silence dissent or the press. And for me, at least, I would put in that category. Efforts to round up kids who have grown up here and for all practical purposes are American kids and send them someplace else when they love this country. They are our kids' friends and their classmates. And are now entering into community colleges or, in some cases, serving in our military. The notion that we would just arbitrarily, or because of politics, punish those kids when they didn't do anything wrong themselves, I think would be something that would merit me speaking out. It doesn't mean that I would get on the ballot anywhere. With respect to wet foot, dry foot, we underwent a monumental shift in our policy towards Cuba. My view was, after 50 years of a policy not working, it made sense for us to try to reopen diplomatic relations. To engage a Cuban government, to be honest with them about the strong disagreements. We have around political repression and treatment of dissenters and freedom of press and freedom of religion. But that to make progress for the Cuban people, our best shot was to suddenly have the Cuban people interacting with Americans, and seeing the incredible success of the Cuban-American community. And engaging in commerce and business and trade, and that it was through that process of opening up these bilateral relations that you would see over time serious and significant improvement. Given that shift in the relationship, the policy that we had in place was wet foot, dry foot. Which treated Cuban émigrés completely different from folks from El Salvador, or Guatemala. Or Nicaragua, or any other part of the world, one that made a distinction between whether You got here by land or by foot. That was a carryover of an old way of thinking that didn't make sense in this day and age, particularly as we're opening up travel between the two countries. And so we had very lengthy consultations with the Department of Homeland Security. We had some tough negotiations with the Cuban government. But we arrived at a policy which we think is both fair and appropriate. To the changing nature of the relationship between the two countries. Nadia Bilbasi. Question, thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity, and I want you and your family best of luck in the future. President Obama, thank you. Question, Mr. President, you have been criticized and even personally attacked for the UN. Security Council resolution that considered the Israeli settlements illegal. And an obstacle to peace. Mr. Trump promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem. He appointed an ambassador that doesn't believe in the two-state solution. How worried are you about the U.S. leadership in the Arab world and beyond as an honest broker? Will this ignite a third intifada? Will this even protect Israel? And in retrospect, do you think that you should have held Israel more accountable? Like President Bush, Sr., did with the loan guarantees? Thank you. President Obama, I continue to be significantly worried about the Israeli-Palestinian issue. and I'm worried about it both because I think the status quo is unsustainable, that it is dangerous for Israel. That it is bad for Palestinians, it is bad for the region, and it is bad for America's national security.